We are, and on the screen, I'll be sharing things, the words of the Gemara and anything which is applicable to understanding it.
Oh, here.
We're discussing a conundrum that we had when it comes to Torah reading on Rosh Chodesh on the first of the month. We have a little issue. There are several rules when it comes to Torah reading. Every aliyah, I'm just going to recap shortly, every aliyah has to be at least 3 verses, 3 psukim long. The Torah is divided by paragraph, which is called a parsha. The verses are from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and we need to read at least 3 verses per aliyah. Every Torah reading must be at least 10 verses. Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month, we have 4 aliyahs, 4 people called to the Torah. We must read at least 3 psukim, 3 verses into any given paragraph. We said 3 verses because Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, different reasons to represent every Jew or every part of Torah. We should not say that just because the part of Torah was said by a prophet later on, it's any less important than when it was said by Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. And it can't be more than 3 verses from the beginning, less than 3 verses from the beginning of a paragraph. And if you end in the middle of a paragraph, you have to leave over at least 3 verses at the end. And on Rosh Chodesh, we have a conundrum. We have 15 verses, 15 psukim to read. We have 4 aliyahs divided in, but we have 3 paragraphs. First paragraph is 8 verses. Second paragraph is 2 verses. Third paragraph is 5 verses. And we're trying to figure out how to divide it to fit all these criteria. And what we come to the conclusion is the only way to do it is like this. So we have 4 aliyahs. Aliyah number 4 is the last 5 psukim, the last 5 verses. It's a whole paragraph of its own, a parsha of its own, and that is enough for its own paragraph. Second paragraph is only 2 psukim, 2 verses. It's not enough to have its own aliyah, all right? Because it's only 2 psukim. You have to add on at least 1 pasuk, 1 verse from the previous paragraph. But we don't finish a paragraph. We don't finish an aliyah with less than 3 psukim left to a paragraph. So the aliyah before that, we read verse 9 and 10, and 3 psukim from the previous one, 8, 7, 6. So that aliyah number 3 is taken care of. For 6, 7, 8, and 9, 10, which is his own paragraph, that's aliyah number 3. Now we got 2 aliyahs to divide among 5 psukim, 5 verses. How do we do that? Every aliyah has to be at least 3 verses, 3 psukim long. And the Gemara had Rav and Shmuel, which said 2 different ways of doing it. Rav said that you divide. So Rav said that you repeat verse number 3. Aliyah number 1 reads verses 1, 2, 3. Aliyah number 2 reads verses 3, 4, 5. We don't usually do that. You don't usually repeat a Torah reading unless you need to. Like on Sukkot, Chol Moed, we do that. But to repeat 1 verse is something that's not done anywhere else but this occasion, and that's what we do. So he says you repeat. So aliyah number 1 is verses 1, 2, 3. Aliyah number 2 is verses 3, 4, 5. Shmuel says, nope, you divide it in half. Aliyah number 1 is verses 1, 2, half of 3. Aliyah number 3 is second half of 3, and 4 and 5. And the Gemara discusses over here the advantages and disadvantages of each way of doing it. When you divide in half a pasuk, 1 aliyah gets 1 pasuk, 1 gets another pasuk. It's something unique. You're doing something Moshe Rabbeinu didn't do. We don't divide pasukim in half when we read the Torah. Only Moshe could do that. Some say it goes the other way around. If somebody comes to shul, he came late to shul. Nobody, I know you never come late to shul, but someone else comes late to shul. And he comes after the first aliyah, before the second aliyah, and they see him starting from verse number 3. So that means the guy thinks to himself, I know this is the second aliyah. That means aliyah number 1 was only verses 1 and 2. They don't know that read 3 and repeating it. Or you also have somebody sometimes leaves early from shul because I don't know, the Steelers are in the playoffs and they don't miss it. And he leaves, let's say he's here at 1, 2, 3 for the first aliyah. And then he leaves shul and he thinks to himself, based on the division of the next psukim, the next verses, I don't see how we're going to be able to possibly divide the aliyahs that every aliyah will have 3 verses. It must be you're allowed to read only 2 psukim, 2 verses in an aliyah. People will come to the wrong conclusion. So he says, better to divide a pasuk in half, a verse in half. Now, one caveat that we did bring is all this discussion and theoretical is back in the day, in the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, when everybody who was called to the Torah read their own aliyah. And there was no bracha, no blessing between every aliyah. Nowadays, people are very occupied, so they don't have time every week to prepare the entire Torah reading of the week in case they get called to an aliyah. So we have one balkari, one person reads it for everyone, and every person makes their own blessing before and after. So therefore, there would be no way of dividing a pasuk, dividing a verse in half. Right, so this discussion is it's decided that's the way we do it. Today we repeat verse number 3. Regarding dividing a pasuk, dividing a verse, although it's something we said we don't do, because chapters in the Torah, that's not a Jewish invention, that's an invention from the different churches and over the monks over the years. But verses, a verse starts here and ends here, and the tunes of the Torah, which tells you where the verses start and stop, that's from Moshe Rabbeinu. However, there are times that we actually do only say half a pasuk. I'll give you an example. How about every Friday night by Kiddush?
Yeah.
The verse starts off, Eichulu Hashemayim, and the Hashem finished making the heavens and earth. The word is Yom HaShishi, and it was on the 6th day. That comes from a different pasuk, a different verse, different paragraph, as a matter of fact. As we see over here, Yom HaShishi is the last 2 words of this paragraph, and Kiddush continues with verse number 2 over here. How about when we bring the Torah back? And we say, Hallelujah, Shem Hashem, Ki Niskav, Shemoy Levadai. That is only half a pasuk, half a verse. And over there, actually, we're only saying half of a verse with Hashem's name.
Well, yeah, which is really incredible.
Usually, when you say a pasuk, a verse, you say a few words which don't have Hashem's name in it. But to say only half a pasuk with Hashem's name and not say the next half, that's something, because the word is Ki Niskav, Shemoy Levadai. Right? Hallelujah, Shem Hashem, praise the name of Hashem. We don't say that. Or there's some places which the Chazan says half of the pasuk and everyone else says the other half of the pasuk. Sometimes in Hallel, some places everyone repeats Hodu Hashem ki tov ki lo elam chastoi. They repeat. For example, by a bris milah, right? The Moel makes a blessing, right? He says, and in middle, everyone answers some words twice during 3 times during the bris milah. One of them is Hoigul Hashem ki tov ki lo chaste, praise Hashem. Some places, who's making the bris milah says Hoigul Hashem. And everyone else answers ki tov ki lo elam chastoi. Hashem ki tov. Everyone answers ki lo elam chastoi. We do the entire verse in Ashkenazim, but other people do half and half. And many times, God will Hashem iti, and some people do the other half. So there are times in certain places in davening that people say half a verse. As Yashir, when he came to the Torah reading, when it came to the Song of the Sea, we had a similar thing. Says that when they cross the ocean, cross the sea, and then there's 3 opinions in the Gemara how the Jews sing the Song of the Sea. And one of the opinions is that Moses said a verse, and everyone answered, the whole Jewish nation answered, Ashir Hashem, with Hashem's name. Let's sing to Hashem. So the psukim were said in such a way that they had half of a pasuk, half of a verse with Hashem's name. But here's something that we actually do have an issue. In Hallel, right? Let's look in Tehillim chapter 1. 118, near the end. Look at this pasuk, this verse. Verse 25, which is Ana Hashem Oshiana, Ana Hashem Atzlichana. Please Hashem save now, please Hashem make us prosperous now. During Hallel, we divide this pasuk in half. And everyone says, Ana Hashem Oshiana. The Chazan says it. Everyone repeats out loud. And we do it twice. And then we do Ana Hashem Atzlichana. So we do make an interruption. We repeat the first half of the pasuk 2 times, and then the second half of the pasuk 2 times. So we do see that there are times when you are able to make changes in a verse. So the Gemara says over here that any pasuk, any verse which Moshe Rabbeinu didn't split, we can split, and that's why Rav does not want to split the verse in half. There are times that we do it. It's a very difficult question that people ask. Tosfos says 2 different people used to say it. One person would say Ana Hashem Hashiana for the first time. A second person would say it the second time. And the same person would say Ana Hashem Atzlichana and say Ana Hashem Atzlichana. That's how he says it was done.
And that actually, there's actually that each one is only saying 1 time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that would make sense then.
Correct. So to basically explain all this, Chaim Volozhiner, I'm sure it's related to Dovi somehow, right? Chaim Volozhiner.
It would be, but there was a Polish shidduch in the family. It didn't fall through.
He talks about not the Nusach Hari, because Nusach Hari changes it because of this question of Chaim Volozhiner. Many people, they raise their finger, say, Bezos, Torah, Shasam Moshe, when they raise the Torah, Lifnei B'nei Yisrael. B'yad Moshe. The words B'yad Moshe are not part of the pasuk, not part of the original verse in Chumash Devarim. As a matter of fact, B'yad Moshe comes from a different Chumash entirely. So how could you add? How could you say different things which are not part of the Chumash? Al Pi Hashem B'yad Moshe is actually the second half of a pasuk, of a different pasuk, right? So how can you put a half of a pasuk and connect it to the beginning of a pasuk? So Chabad custom is we don't say this Al Pi Hashem B'yad Moshe because we don't want to take only a half of a verse, right? But many nuschos, many sidurim have this. Moshe Lefnei Bnei Yisrael, and then they put half of another pasuk Al Pi Hashem B'yad Moshe. According to the hand of Hashem, the word of Hashem, the hand of Moshe. So Chaim Volozhiner, he says that you have to change the nusach. He has a different nusach. And he says you're really quoting, he actually changes a few of the words. And he says, Zos HaTorah till Lifnei B'nei Yisrael, and he takes away the second half. But to answer this general question, how can you divide a pasuk? How can you divide a verse? The answer given by the Magen Avraham is whenever you have an asnachta. Asnachta is you have every pasuk, every word has its own cantillation. So this its own note, and the note over here, which is like the upside down. How do you pronounce it? It's like a horseshoe, or it's like a tuner for a violin. The snachta under the word Lashem here, Anisani. Most psukim, most verses, you have a break in the middle, and you have an asnachta. So that note which divides the word in half. So he says, whenever you have an asnachta, you are allowed to divide a pasuk, divide a verse, if there's a need. Like when it comes for davening or something else, you're allowed to divide it. So, for example, Ana Hashem Mashiach Na, the word Na you have an asnachta. So you have that underneath. So he says that's like a half of a pasuk. The line at the end is called the sof pasuk, the end of a verse. But the one in the middle is like a half of a break. And therefore, on Shabbos day, many people, when they make Kiddush, they start off with the words Al Kain Berach out loud.
Yeah.
Now, okay, we do say the whole verse before, but they only start in the middle of a pasuk, Al Kain out loud. Someone else comes along. As a kid, I always thought Kiddush started from Al Kain Berach, right? And if you start from there, you run into an issue. Because Al Kain Berach has Hashem's name. Al Kain Berach Hashem es Yom HaShabbos v'yikadshayu. That's in the middle of a pasuk, the middle of a verse, and you are missing, and it's only half of a pasuk. It has Hashem's name, right? So he says, but that comes after an esnachta, comes after a pause. So even if people make the mistake, and now someone who doesn't know there's a whole introduction to Kiddush, and he comes and starts from Al Kain, it's not such an issue because there's an esnachta, there's a break over there. When it comes to the first day of creation, on Simchas Torah, usually, at least the Chabad shuls, everyone's after a little Kiddush at this point. So I don't know how much people actually recall. But there's 6 days of creation, and every one of the 6 days of creation, as soon as we come to the end, and it was evening and it was morning one day. And every single time, the Bakora stops, and everyone says aloud, although this is only a half of a pasuk, half of a verse, and again, our whole issue with Shmuel is that we can't make new divisions in Psukim, which we don't have from Moshe Rabbeinu. There was one Rav, a certain big pasuk said, in his, whoever listened to him, says, you don't do it on Simchas Torah, don't repeat it. I'm not sure what it's like in other circles, if they say it or not. But many, many communities which do it, and it's again, because the word before has an esnachta, has a stop, therefore you're able to count it as a half a pasuk, half a verse, but it's like it's his own verse. So over here, it would be the same idea. You have an esnachta in the middle of verse 3, and you stop it by the word La Hashem. It has its own, it could be considered to be a half a verse. So even if someone technically would make a bracha on it after, it's not so bad because it's a half a pasuk. But what's the halacha? Who do we go like? Amar Reb Tanchum, Amar Reb Yeshua ben Levi. Says Reb Tanchum, says in the name of Reb Yeshua ben Levi, halacha hiyesh omrim. The halacha is like the opinion which says that you always have to, when you're reading a paragraph, you have to start 3 psukim in. You can't start, if you're starting in the middle, you shouldn't start when you're starting to read a paragraph, don't stop a pasuk or 2 in, stop at least 3 psukim in. And like the reason is because you don't start a new pasuk, a new paragraph without going at least 3 psukim in, as we're going to have the reasoning right below. The Amar of Tanchum, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, says Rabbi Tanchum, the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kashem she'en maschilin beparsha pachas mishlosh psukim, kach ein meshayir parsha pachas mishlosh psukim. Whenever you read a paragraph, and you start a paragraph, read at least 3 verses in. And if you finish the middle of a paragraph, leave at least 3 verses to the end. And like the reason will be said because some people come late to shul, some people leave early from shul, and people are going to come to say, you don't have to read 3 psukim. I see he left only 2 psukim left to the end, so you don't have to read, you can only read 2 psukim for an aliyah. So in order that people should not come to make a mistake. Continues the Gemara. Shita hashta maskalta de kamekel tanakama machmeri yeshemrim shudach machm tanakama lekol shekein the machmeri yeshemrim. We have 2 opinions which were brought here in the Gemara. Yaakov, welcome back. We're so excited to see you. Welcome back, Yaakov. I would have thought to say, you have a paragraph here in the Torah which has psukim, let's say this one has 8 verses. If you're reading at least 3 psukim in, you might think to say that that's a first opinion. Second opinion says you have to also leave 3 psukim at the end when you stop. If the first opinion is being more lenient, he says you're allowed to finish with 2 psukim left. The second opinion says you also have to leave 3 psukim over. So you might think, why should I have to repeat the first path? If you hold the opinion, you have to at least start 3 psukim in, because some people come late. So then, if you have to leave at least 3 psukim over because some people leave early and might come to make a mistake, you're being more stringent. So what is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi really coming to add over here? So Gemara says, let me explain to you. It's common, very common for people to come late to shul. Who knows what could have happened? Back then, you might have had a traffic jam. Somebody's ducks are trying to cross the road. Or who knows what could have happened. The famous story of the rabbi comes to shul. Every Shabbos, his speech is about 10 minutes long. One Shabbos, he comes to shul, and he speaks for an hour. And everyone is scratching their faces. And what happened? After, the Kiddush, after shul, they ask him, tell us what happened. Well, what today for an hour? He says, every day as I'm walking to shul, every Shabbos, I prepare what I'm going to say. It takes me 10 minutes every week to walk to shul. Today, there was construction. I had to take a detour today. So it took me an hour to walk to shul today. So I spoke for an hour. So there's times coming to shul late, accidents happen, things happen. You have to change a diaper before you go. Something happens. However, once people come to shul, they don't usually leave early. They usually stay for Torah reading and respect for the Torah. The Torah is out. So you stay till the end of the Torah reading. It's common, so therefore, people coming late, which is more common, it makes sense to make a decree that you have to always read at least 3 verses in the beginning. At the end, if you leave over 2 psukim, it's not a big deal. They're probably going to stay to the end and see how you repeat the pasuk. But in the beginning, people come late. But as the words of the Gemara is, the manchi sefer Torah v'nafki, people will not leave a sefer Torah and walk out. Kamash Malan, this comes to teach us. Now we're actually with the day of Yud Shvat. This is a very sobering story, you could say, of the Rebbe, which happened on Yud Shvat with the sefer Torah. Yud Shvat was Shabbos, right?
Yeah. So we're the week of it, yeah.
Right. Now, as we spoke last Shabbos, whoever could should get an aliyah. We spoke Friday, whoever is able to should get an aliyah, because it's a minhag custom is you get an aliyah to the Torah the Shabbos before you have a yard site.
I did.
So you got an aliyah the Shabbos?
I did. Whatever was I knew I was going to be late to get to Torah. And this particular week it was very good to get to Torah. So I stopped off at Lubavitch, got an aliyah, and went off to get to Torah.
Right. Right. So we get an aliyah the Shabbos before Yud Shvat, and the Rebbe said you shouldn't add more aliyahs to the Torah reading, rather make many Torah readings. So you go to shul from 8:30 in the morning. There are many minions for Torah reading. Everyone should get an aliyah. That was in 770. This past Shabbos. There are hundreds of you have to reserve. I'm going to be in 2 Torah readings from now on this Torah. Anyways, Baruch Hashem, everyone gets an aliyah. So it was a Shabbos. The Rebbe used to. The Rebbe became Rebbe in the 1950. In the 1950s, and until 1961, I think it happened. It happened sporadically, but Shabbos morning, the Rebbe wanted to encourage the yeshiva boys who come to yeshiva to learn to come on time Shabbos morning. And also, there were in the past, the custom was some of the Chabad Rebbes in the past used to say a Maimer, Chassidic discourse, Shabbos morning. Maimer is more special than the Sikha, more than a regular talk. It's a deep Chassidic discourse. So the Rebbe would many times, I can't say many times, probably happened altogether 15, 20 times over, it happened from time to time. That Chassidus officially, learning Chassidus davening started at 10 o'clock, and the Rebbe would walk in at 8 o'clock in the morning to where the 770 yeshiva bachrim are learning, and the Rebbe it starts at 8 o'clock the learning. The Rebbe will walk in at 7:58, 7 a few minutes before, and the Rebbe would, whoever's coming, the Rebbe would tell them come inside, and then as second it hit 8 o'clock, the door will close, it will be locked, and just for the bachrim that were there, the Rebbe would say a Maimer Chassidus, very special Maimer. And this happened, you never know when it would happen for those that were there. And it was a very special thing, because usually you have a Fabrengen with thousands of people, at least hundreds back in the 50s. And here it's a very small crowd listening to the Rebbe say a Maimer early in the morning before davening on Shabbos. There was one Shabbos morning, where it was a Shabbos before Yud Shvat, and everyone is getting an aliyah being called to the Torah. And so they're minyanim. Even back then, there were many people who know in 1961 who wanted to get an aliyah to the Torah. So, and they wanted to be on time for Chassidus because they always want to be on time for Seder, for the yeshiva schedule. Plus, you never know when the Rebbe is going to come in and say a Maimer.
And if you want to have a bracha, it's good to see when you can chap the Rebbe.
Exactly. Well, no, I don't think people would interrupt the Rebbe at that point. It was like a certain system that was set up. You needed a bracha, you wrote a letter in. I don't think people back then wouldn't abuse it as much. I mean, later on, people became smarter, wiser.
Work the system.
Yes. So there was like a big shul, there was a larger shul upstairs and a smaller shul next door. And the Rebbe would usually say the Maimer when he would come in the larger shul. So in the smaller shul next door, there was a minyan for Torah reading. People came early to get an aliyah by the Torah that Shabbos. As soon, the middle of Torah reading, and then suddenly they hear the Rebbe walks into the larger shul and says, now the Rebbe wants to say a Maimer. Whoever came on time. So everybody was in the middle of the Torah reading, was getting an aliyah. They left the Torah there. They covered it. They left the Torah and quickly ran to the room to hear the Rebbe reading, hear the Rebbe say a Maimer. And the Rebbe asked, the Rebbe said, it's a bizayon. It's a not respectful to leave it Sefer Torah in the middle. And whoever, make sure the minyan that was there should go back to the Sefer Torah. And I guess the people there, thought, okay, let someone else go. Let me hear the Maimer. So the Rebbe said a second time, whoever is part of that minyan should go back to the Sefer Torah and to take, not to leave a Torah unattended, out of the Kodesh. After saying a second time and nobody moved to go back. So the Rebbe said, today there won't be a Maimer. And then the Rebbe walked out and the Rebbe went to his room. And that was the last time that there was, or it was supposed to be. The Rebbe stopped doing that thing, a special thing of having a Maimer Shabbos morning at 8 a.m. So people do not usually leave a Sefer Torah in the middle. I understand that was an extenuating circumstance, and the Rebbe had to sort of remind everybody, as excited as you are to hear a unique Maimer, it's more important to not leave a Sefer Torah unattended. So, therefore, if someone comes early to shul, if someone comes late to shul, they can't help it. But once the Sefer Torah is taken out, people do not usually leave because it's not respectful to the Sefer Torah to leave in the middle. For sure, not respectful to speak in the middle of Torah reading. Well, that's a given.
Yeah, indeed.
That's it. I'm not saying any names. All right. So says the Gemara. We're just going to finish next about 2 lines. V'tanakama ma'ishna shir v'loi mishum yoisim eschuli nami gzeira mishum hanichnasim. So the rationale goes like this. There's an opinion which says that you cannot start an aliyah, cannot start a new paragraph unless you go 2 psukim in, but you cannot finish a paragraph, cannot leave over less than 3 psukim at the end. You can't finish a paragraph with only 2 psukim left. Read verses 1, 2, 3, and not 4, 5, because people leave early. let's say, perhaps since it's more common for people to come late to shul than it is for people to leave early from shul, so therefore, even if you want to be more stringent and say that you cannot finish a parsha with less, you cannot leave over less than 3 psukim of 3 verses at the end of a paragraph, and no one should come to mistake that you could leave, that if they leave shul, there's at least 3 psukim left, they're going to know that Aliyah is at least 3 verses long. There's an opinion which says that, let's say you need to finish up the psukim, so you can read 17, let's say 18, 17, 18, 19, and 20 and 21. 1 or 2 verses of the next paragraph. Why don't you say the same thing? Someone's going to come in late to shul, and they're going to see when you start from the beginning of a paragraph, and you only read 2 psukim, and they're going to think that you only read 2 psukim for the aliyah. Where's the Amri? So the answer like this: Man the ayil shiule shayil. If somebody comes to shul and he comes in the middle of an aliyah, right? So if somebody comes and is starting aliyah and there's only 2 psukim, he's going to think he could do 2 psukim. But if somebody comes in and they're in the middle of an aliyah and he hears a reader begin with a second or third verse of a new paragraph, he's going to ask him, how is it possible that the previous one only read 2 psukim, 2 verses, and then they're going to tell him, oh, the guy repeated it, or he started from the previous paragraph. And they will explain to him how the person didn't really read 2 psukim. So somebody who comes late is not going to come to have an impression by mistake that you're allowed to read less than 3 psukim. However, if somebody leaves early, he's not sticking around to question. How can he leave over? He's going to, if you read if you read an aliyah and now you have 2 psukim left in the paragraph, he's leaving shul early. If he would stay longer, he would see they're repeating a pasuk, and you are doing 3 psukim. So he's not sticking around to ask, hey, you have to read 3 psukim. Why are you leaving only 2 at the end?
I remember, like afterwards, like you wonder, what level of actually likelihood to have a gesirah? In others, most people, okay, maybe they're going to come late to shul, but they're going to be sticking out to the bitter end of the shul. We didn't go to shul or leave early, unless God forbid there's a dentist appointment or something, you know.
Right.
So that we're making, like, how unlikely an event before the rabbi say, okay, it's not worth making a gzera for this amount.
So saying, at what point do we stop making a gzera?
Exactly, yeah.
That's a good question. A lot of what we do, a lot of you describe as gzeras, as decrees, because of this, because of that. Some of them might seem a little bit far-fetched in our mind. There is a certain point, you know, it says about the Kohen Gadol, he has to be married to be a Kohen Gadol. If his wife dies, then he can't go on Yom Kippur, he can't go into the Holy of Holies. Because you have to be married, because when you're married, you have a family that you could daven for and pray for as well. And it's one of the prayers that he davens is for his family as well. And so in the Mishnah, in Mesechta Yoma, it says, you have to, if a Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, they would have a replacement Kohen Gadol in case something happens to him and he can't do it. So they said you have to make a replacement wife in case his wife dies, that he can marry someone else. So the other Tal answer, "Ein l'davar sof." Then there's no end to it. You know what happens if a second one dies? You have to have a third one, right? So there is a certain point where something which is uncommon at all, you don't make a gzera, don't make a decree at all. You don't have to make a decree. But something which here you could come to make a mistake, that you would make a decree. And something fundamental like Torah reading, it's a very fundamental thing. So the Jewish people lost in the war during times of Yeshua because they didn't learn Torah for 3 days.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very important. And Yeshua. So it's very important when it comes to Torah reading that everyone gets it right and come to the impression that you don't just say one pasuk, one verse, but you do 3 at a time. You know, there's a story of the rabbi is giving a drasha, a speech. In the middle, somebody gets up and leaves. He asks him, "Where are you going?" In the middle of a speech. Middle of a sermon, and he says, I'm going to get a haircut. He says, what? You couldn't think of it before I gave a sermon? Because I didn't need one before. We're going to conclude with some Kuntres Umayan. You see it on the screen? Kuntres Umayan is a very unique pamphlet. It was given out as a pamphlet by the Rebbe Rashab. My father, Al Shalom, he gave some of the early classes of Kuntres Umayan when we were learning it over here back then. Well, like in chapters, in Maimer 1 or 2, it's divided into Mamarim, discourses. Each one has several chapters. And now we're holding in the second to last Maimer. We have about 2 chapters left to the entire Sefer. And now he's wrapping up the crux. He's coming to a lot of the practical applications of everything I was learned before. The first half of this kuntres of this entire book or pamphlet was talking about ruach shtus, idea of foolishness, how a person could convince himself that if I sin, or even more than that, because I sin, because I do something that the Torah doesn't want, I'll have a good life. And he explained they might be right, they might not be wrong, they might be right. But it's short-term, long-term, it won't be. Long-term, it doesn't. And explain the spiritual mechanics, how that works. Then, the whole second half, we went to great length, going through all the opinions of how often a person is judged, all the different sources. It says, on Rosh Hashanah, you're judged how much money you will earn that year. And it says in another place, you're judged every single day, how much you'll earn that year. And it says in another place, you're judged every hour. How does it work? Everyone comes to show Rosh Hashanah because we know we were being judged for the whole year. So are we being judged on Rosh Hashanah? What about every day? Why do we daven every day then? And every day we daven and we say, Hashem, make us heal, give us sustenance, many things we ask. And we explain that at great length. Also, based on the spiritual mechanics of it, we explain that what happens in Rosh Hashanah is like a pledge, you could say. I'm pledging I'm going to give this and that. And you have to collect the pledge every single day. You have to go, and by davening, we're bringing that, what's called the spiritual blueprint, and we're bringing it down into actuality. That's what happens every single day when one is judged. Every moment is how you come, as every single moment you're going to get in a good way, in a not good way. Money, which you're going to get extra beyond, you might think you steal the money. It's going to end up being spent on mechanic bills or doctor bills, one or the other. So you're never going to earn a penny more or a penny less. And he says, but if a person every single day acts the way they're supposed to, the Torah wants of them, it brings down the pledge into a physical means. And if not, it stays a spiritual means. After you die in the world to come, you'll get the reward of what you're supposed to get. But to make it a physical and to bring it down, that's what we daven for, and we're judged and every single day. This kuntres, say this pamphlet, was written for a very unique type of Jew and a unique type of chassid. And the timing when the Rebbe Rashab wrote this is very appropriate. Within a few years at that point, Rebbe Rashab wrote 4 different kuntres and pamphlets. One is called Kuntres Hatfila, Kuntres of Davening. The pamphlet talks about davening, which is tremendous, First of all, the depth there is amazing, and also it's just tremendous how one has to prepare themselves for davening. And you see, sometimes you hear about sitting down for hours. What were they doing? Kuntres Tefillah will tell you. It's Kuntres Avoda, how to serve Hashem, which has very, very strong mamarim in there about how to come to Avos Hashem, loving Hashem, Yiras Hashem. What does it mean to fear Hashem because you're scared of getting hit? What does it mean you're scared, which is not the way one is supposed to serve Hashem? Maybe it's when it's starting, that's what they get used to. Then you're scared, when you leave the house and your children say, don't leave. They're scared of being separated from you.
It's just like with a parent, with a parent actually is being scripted, the child But we start, it's not actually, oh, this is the
Correct.
ideal relationship. It's right now, I have to make sure the child is gonna be good. Later on, let the child appreciate.
Correct, yeah. No, again, serving Hashem, right? It's not about we want to be a tzaddik.
Mhm.
It's not like that. The Chassidus is not about becoming perfect. It's about the journey towards there. Perfection might be the goal, but we're not out to get to the goal. We're out to journey towards the goal, not to achieve the goal, because the perfect person has yet to be created. And then there's this Kunter Sumayan. Kunter Sumayan is for the layman, the working man. The guy is busy, he has a job. So I don't have time to learn all day, daven. Even if I do have the time, I don't have the headspace for it. Let me live. And he went through different, well, this is like the mind we're in the middle of now, he went through describing different type of people, different type of attitudes. Some of them are coming from a very good place. Not all of them come from a place of flippancy or apathy. Some of them come from a positive place. But he's explaining how all of them, it's because he's not letting in himself the light of his neshama to shine through. And the way to make your neshama shine through is to connect yourself to Hashem in a way without any questions, to go beyond, above and beyond. When somebody constantly, day in, day out, is worried about, where am I going to get the next dollar? Where am I going to get the next this and next that? That's just one example. So with time, it clouds a judgment, you could say, or clouds one's sensitivity. And to resensitize a person to spiritual matters, that happens not in one day, but slowly. But what comes, there's always going to be that one moment where the person will have to have a shtus to kedusha. Instead of being a foolishness in the extreme, into the not good way, there's going to be the moment where it's going to be like the decisive moment, right? Where he realizes that now he has a choice to make, and you have to use a shtus to kedusha, the foolishness of your neshama. So we'll do the, in the 2 minutes left, we'll do the kitzer, you can't really call it a summary, it's more like bullet points. Because it doesn't say everything that was said of the most previous chapter. Our Jews have one very good and very characteristic. It's our biggest blessing and it's our biggest detriment, you could say, which is akshanas. We're very stubborn people. We use our stubbornness sometimes in very good ways. We sometimes use our stubbornness in very not good ways. Baruch Hashem, we kept ourselves alive in Yiddishkeit with the Torah and everything, when other nations that have gone through, or we've gone through, probably would have just stopped being who they are.
They've readily,
Because
and they've readily given up actually their
Correct.
religion, like you converted that. Okay, we'll convert.
in the same thing, a person could stop themselves from going after what their desires, what their lusts are. It's a term that's, I don't know, was popular a couple of years ago called impulse control. Just control your impulse. It's something which a person could do. If I have a big desire to do one thing, I could, fight against the bull, you could say, and to hold the bull by the horns. To use the same obstinacy that we're granted, which is sometimes used in a negative way, to use it in a very good way. Misha or nafshay helikis bilti mer lebigile. Someone does not have sensitivity in their soul. Say, this whole thing doesn't talk to me. It happens to everyone. Don't think it's that doesn't happen to me or anyone else. It happens all the time. Every day is a struggle. One day you're in the mood, one day you're not in the mood. So at those times when you're not in the mood, that's a time to manifest in oneself the obstinacy and to connect connect yourself to Hashem and do Torah mitzvahs, even if it doesn't make sense. And I brought an example last time of a person came to Pittsburgh. He asked my father to arrange for him a minyan, and he thought he has to say Kaddish. It was 12 o'clock at night, and he brought him a minyan to his hotel by the airport. And afterwards, are you a chiyuv? Like, do you have to say Kaddish? No, I just love minyanim. And he says, is anyway help you? He says, there's a public seder going on, and a week later, person paid for it. They think they paid $5,000 for a public seder and $2,000 for another public seder, right there. But he said, there's one mitzvah which I'm very careful on, which is a minyan. And so if one time the minyan cost me more, that's what it cost. Seichel machlis shesaratzin. Then we spoke about the idea how when you rationalize things, then right away it weakens your desire. Right? I'm going to, kill every terrorist in Gaza. Let's discuss this first. Once it's up for discussion, the battle is lost. Right? That's what happened, let's say, during communism. They wanted to make big public debates with rabbis. Even if the rabbis would win the debate, which happened many times. Right? Once it's up for discussion, the battle's already lost, even though the war is already lost, you could say. Once you rationalize things, it's very quick to weaken a desire. But the obstinacy we as Jewish people have could overcome even one's rationalizations, even one's mind. And when one is obstinate, when one is stubborn, and have a set time for learning, and nothing is going to stop it. I gave you the example of Rabbi Rifkin, Mr. Rabbi Rifkin. Right? He opened up a farm in Kfar Chabad that had cows. He wanted to close it. He wanted to retire. The Rabbi told him to keep your cows open in Kfar Chabad. There wasn't a single farm left but him. The Rabbi told him to keep it open. And anything could happen. He had every day at 1 p.m. he would learn the chavrusa with somebody else together. No matter what happened, there was a fire on the farm. He didn't even go to check. He's learning. This is called obstinacy of kedusha, of holiness. But that also weakens one's sensitivity. So to take our asset that we have, that weakens the natural sensitivity, increases the spiritual sensitivity. So we're going to pause here for today.